Hi pals, it's me Artie, they them pronouns only, and believe it or not, I'm more excited about this video than I was for the Quinny video. I have put more effort into this one because I had some more time and energy. I do have a little bit more of a pre-written and thought about script. This video generally is about Cash as the asexual representation in Heartbreak High. For now, my little intro to Cash, basically, I guess, is that, you know, initially he's kind of a background character, especially compared to the rest of the cast. He's not necessarily trendy. Like, if you compare him to the rest of the cast, he's definitely less glamorous than basically everybody else, even compared to, like, Spider. Cash, my dear, is an Eshe, and he is a struggling boy, basically. He's also not in any of the social groups that we see in that first episode, and he's in for most of, I guess, the social aspects, but really for him it was working aspect, was that he had drug connections, and people told him or invited him to the parties because they knew that he would be dealing drugs, and they liked that a lot. We see his character as well evolve, especially in the first series. Initially he's quite cold, standoffish, quiet, and I mean, I think later on we find out he's actually quite shy, which maybe is why he's coming off like this as well, and he gives off a very intimidating sort of vibe. I've learned a little bit here and there on Australian Tumblr, because I don't know shit about Eshes. Don't worry, I know. I don't know shit. But from a few of the posts that I have seen about Eshes in particular, in reference to Heartbreak High and Cash, like Eshe culture, this is kind of pretty standard. Like, bare minimum what they expect other Eshes to be and act like elsewhere. Obviously, hold my hands up if I'm absolutely talking out my arse. But I got it from Aussies on Tumblr, so don't blame me. However, Cash is one of the more quiet Eshes who doesn't often, you know, like start things. He doesn't usually start fights. He doesn't usually start problems. He's one of the Eshes who kind of goes under the radar quite a lot. And he is an Eshe, and with the Eshes, basically for survival. In Heartbreak High, he realises in this first season he doesn't actually need them for survival anymore, and he does have other options. And one of the main turning points for him and his relationship to the Eshes is that Harper was almost R-worded or essayed. We're not really sure what was going to happen, but like definitely something really bad, and Cash helped her escape by unlocking the doors of the car. And he somehow got away with this under like the Eshes of the group. Nobody seemed to realise that he did this. This was the beginning of the end for Cash as well, with his alliance with the Eshes. He does not align himself with these behaviours. It's one thing when you pinch a rich guy's car or clothes from an expensive store, but planning to assault a girl who is underage? Yeah, kind of a different league. How the show sets up for an asexual character. So I think that the setup is quite interesting. Subtle, but I like it. It's subtle because it's pretty dead on realistic of just like existing in the world as an asexual person. There is an emphasis on the idea that the rest of the cast of characters just don't understand the idea or the possibility how people don't think about sex all the time, or like as much as they do. Quite early on, Amory asks, how does someone not think about sex? This kind of stuff creates the invisibility of asexual people among a cast of diverse characters with varied and complex sexualities. And then as the show develops, the SLT class opens up the option and possibility to discuss asexuality, but often it is never fully discussed. We have the anonymous question box / confession box, where I think Missy picked this piece of paper and reads, I have to really get to know someone before I have sex with them. And as that was read out, we get a close-up view of Cash. But also I and a few other people on Tumblr, as I've noticed, have speculated that maybe, I mean, I have speculated this, I haven't seen anyone say this specifically, but anyway, I think that that could have also been Spider. Maybe. We know now by the end of season 2 that Cash is actually so sex repulsed, avoidant, that actually he doesn't even really need to get to know the person. He just does not want to do it. And that's fair. That's completely valid. That is one of the many depictions and experiences of asexuality. However, we know Spider does want to. However, he seems to only be able to, hello season 2, when he actually really gets to know somebody and develops a safe connection and bond with them. Because, like, he doesn't seem to, you know, he's not like doing anything, and he's been lying about who he's hooking up with, as we know from Quinny. So season 3, and at the end of season 1, as Cash is running from the police, is about to like burst into the SLT classroom, Jojo says some people might choose not to have sex because, and like we don't get the full sentence because that's when Cash busts in. And yeah, the term ace or asexuality, it only comes up once in 2 seasons. And I think that's for a reason. And then in season 2, we also have the Puritans as a direct comparison between him and them. They're all sex-obsessed teenagers who feel shame about wanting sex and who feel showing strength through abstinence is like important. I don't know. They do try to force their values and their shame upon other people. What people expect asexuals to be versus what Cash is. So I think a lot of people expect asexuals to be kind of religious nuts, forcing abstinence upon people, someone who is sex negative and judgmental of people having sex, incels, nerds who can't get anybody, and like maybe even like kind of a goody two-shoes in a way, somebody who is so morally rigid that they cannot or will not evolve as a person past their very rigid moral values, whether it is related to religion or not. However, Cash is, well, for one, an esche who often does things against the mainstream moral code by, you know, doing some illegal things. Cash makes and laughs at dirty jokes, is not bothered by other people having sex or chasing sex most of the time, has a very sexual nan who is regularly hooking up with blokes and has like a boyfriend and openly talks about sex, to the point that even Darren doesn't want to know. He is non-judgmental, kind, and has done what he has done for survival. He is someone who loves people for who they are, not who he wants them to be, unlike the Puritans, as I just ran through. So then we have the development of Cash and Darren's relationship. Obviously, we start with the map. Cash was on the map with a couple of people and ends up as one of the people in the SLT classes. We see him dealing drugs at the graveyard party, and Darren speaks to him, saying things like, you know, didn't you repeat a year? Aren't you 18? Why do you stick around? You could go and do whatever. And he's like, I have my reasons. Foreshadowing. My reasons are you, babe. We see as well, Cash is in the group from the SLT class that gets to study outside with Darren, who seems to have had a random like spring of interest about Cash, even though they've kind of been around each other for years. They get to know each other better when Darren gets the job at the fast food place, because Cash does food delivery and is often there on his little moped thing. I think it's a moped. This is where more of their like initial conversations start and where some of the ice breaking kind of begins. Darren helps Cash hide some of the stolen gear at their house initially, but their dad notices and warns against being friends with esches, but also that he won't have stolen gear at his house, so Darren has to return it to Cash and they hide it at the school instead. Cash learns here basically that if he is to be considered trustworthy and safe to be around Darren, according to Darren's dad, he needs to make some decisions and changes, reaffirming basically his nan's initial push to find some new fucking friends. We find out that Cash is bi when he is giving Darren a stick and poke tattoo. Darren is feeling out whether Cash is into girls, guys, or whoever by asking things like, you must have been on the map because you're in sluts, but I didn't see who with. A couple of people. And Darren's like, people? And like they're like little flirty chemistry is so cute and I love it so much. Mwah, perfection. Cash says something like, I don't shout about it or advertise it like other people do. And like a note here as well, because that line doesn't come off great, obviously, especially with having no previous backstory yet about Cash's situation. But again, this is some other things I learned from the Aussies on Tumblr, that a lot of Eshe culture is the idea of being like openly queer as an Eshe is kind of unheard of or really rare. It seems that he's not out to them. It's not that he sees being out and proud as like garish or sees it in a homophobic light. It is simply just that he cannot do that due to survival needs. Then we have the Mardi Gras episode. Cash is invited over to Darren's for pre-drinks in a small group. Quinny immediately picks up that Darren is has a thing for Cash before Cash shows up. When Cash shows up, he's got a black eye from speaking up to Chuck previously, which was a very mild confrontation, but still resulted in him getting a fucking black eye. So like that also continues to remind Cash that he has no power and control in this situation with the Eshes, and he has to hide a lot of who he is and where his morals are when he's with them. And then we have both Cash and Malachi being so down to be queered up. I love my bi autistic boys. I love them. And then Cash ends up with a G-string eye patch. Oh, I'm not going to get pink eye from wearing this on my eye. And then at the actual Mardi Gras celebrations, we see Darren and Cash dancing together quite a lot. And honestly, it's so sweet seeing them in some of the crowd scenes as well, because there's one bit in particular that I just think is so like funny, but in like a nice, I don't know, youthful kind of way. I'm 30 this year, youthful, where like you can see Cash is just like dancing, living his best fucking life. His dancing, I live for his dancing, and I can't even explain it to you. I can't explain why, but I fucking love his little dancing. He's basically dancing just in front of Darren, who's just there like, yes, very good. 10 all round. And I don't know, it's just such an odd moment to have them. I just think it's so funny. Then Darren goes and does like the voguing competition. We see Cash, who just looks absolutely fucking mesmerized. Like, oh my god, Darren is so beautiful. And he sees Darren talking to some twink whose name I can't remember afterwards, and thinks Darren wants to go off and get with him. He's not picked up. Hello, autism, he's not picked up. That maybe Darren has been quite seriously flirting with him. My autistic son, I love you. And he just thinks they're friends, probably. But also, if there was a possibility, there would be like, it would never go anywhere because of Cash being ace. So he's just like, okay, cool, he just slinks away. And then he bumps into one of the Eshes who's there dealing, and it's not Chuck. Don't know who he is, but it's not Chuck. And he looks really panicked. And this is something that I didn't fully grasp until Aussie Tumblr filled in some blanks about Eshes. You know, like Cash is dressed up very queer. And then the Eshe who sees him is like not remotely shocked, surprised, concerned. He doesn't give a fuck. He don't give a fuck. He don't care. Like when he sees him, he's like, Chuck's crazy or something like that. Basically showing that he doesn't give a shit if Cash is queer, and like it's basically all just like Chuck, the leader, being that way. And now that whole little moment makes sense to me. Darren confronts Cash. Thank God you're here. Where you been, bitch? Where have you bloody been? You know, that he disappeared and they wanted to talk to him after their dancing competition thing. And then Cash explains, like, I thought you were interested in that twink over there. And Darren's like, lol, ew, no. Disgusting. Disgusting. No way. We have bylighting. To be fair, we have a lot of bylighting just in this whole scene. But we have bylighting. Bisexual lighting. As Cash asks Darren if he can kiss them. And of course Darren says yes. And I just want to cry every fucking time. Fuck me. I'm crying now just thinking about it. Fuck. So then we have Cash and Darren like actively dating now. However, Darren is upset that Cash seems to want to take things slow and is talking to Winnie about it, and Darren tries it on in numerous ways with Cash. They try to take things further when they're making out in the car. They send notes, trying it on when Cash is still asleep. And then one of the days they're meant to go and have a little date, Cash has to take his nan to a games night. So Darren tags along to hang out. And Cash is like, let's get out of here. But Darren's like, nah, I want to play cards with these ancient old biddies. Like, and they really like Cash's nan, as they should, because so does literally everybody on the internet. His nan is genuinely an icon. Actually, the whole Cash family are, who are left. And then one of Nan's friends is gay, and he's talking about being gay and only having had the love of his life for a very brief moment in time. And then like, yeah, Darren says like, yeah, but isn't it good to have had them at least for a little while if you couldn't have them forever? And Cash is like, big soft happy gay baby eyes across the table, and of course his nan fucking knows. His nan knows. She knows everything. And like, yeah, just the way that Darren fits in with this old biddy circle. Like, you know, oh, you fit into my fucking strange life. I think that's also something that both of those characters have in common, is multiple barriers in life and romance, a little bit like what I talked about in my 6 year single video. Because, you know, like, Cash has a lot of family baggage in like quite an intense way. Like, I'm pretty sure everybody else in his family is just straight up locked away in prison. He's bisexual and asexual. I know from personal experience how difficult that is as it is. And, you know, he lives with his nan, is kind of a carer, kind of not. And he was held back a year. It is an issue. Was an issue, you know, not ideal circumstances. So like, I think they both find it difficult to feel like people can and will love them. So seeing each other kind of just slide into their lives is very affirming, and like, oh yeah, I'm doing the right thing, nice one. Cash's nan is trying to cupid him with Darren as she's off out on a date, and he'll have the house to himself alone. He's trying to take some little... This was the episode where he was sent nudes. He was sent a Darren nude. So he's trying to take some sexy photos of himself. And I love him. He's so awkward. He accidentally calls Darren and then hangs up. Darren calls back and he's just like, fuck, I'm stuck. He awkwardly invites Darren over. And that's when we get introduced to Darude. It's Darude. No, that's Darude. No, he's a full mad lad. He's sick. Go pity him. I love Darude. Cash admits he's never been sent a nude before. I love him. He shows Darren all of his attempts at taking his own to respond. And they are all so cringe, but also like every photo I've ever seen of like a working class lad trying to take like a thirst trap. I think you should ask Malachi for some tips, because we already know that Malachi is really good at posting thirst traps. Thank you. They're snogging on Cash's bed, and he kind of just goes, "Can we just stay here in this moment? Is that okay?" And then they have just like a nice little like cuddly moment, and he's like tired and falls asleep, and it's so soft and nice and adorable. I love them. Love them. Darren stays the night, and in the morning, that's when they try to start something with Cash's morning glory, and like he wakes up like, no, stop, I don't want that, and is like trying to explain, but also yeah, like of course Darren doesn't understand. They think Cash just doesn't want them, and he tries to say like, I'm not like you, and he's wired differently, and he just like needs some time and patience. And Darren's response is, you know, I think there might be something really wrong with you. That was awful. Anyway, Cash angrily shouts back like, well, fuck you then, and just tells Darren to get the fuck out. Just get out. Yeah, I feel that, Cash. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with you. I love you. I see you. Cash. And then yeah, this is something that actually comes up a lot for many aspec people, not just asexual people, but also aromantic people. Ironically, even in Christian spaces, especially ones who are all about abstinence, there is a lot of conversion therapies and corrective R wording conducted on ace and aro people, just like other sexualities and trans people. The one thing that's a little different in Cash's response is that rather than bowing down to other people shaming him, directly or indirectly, is actually, fuck you for not caring enough to try to understand me. And I think that is very slay. Quinny is being really good about this whole issue that Darren has, and he's trying to help Darren see that actually Cash may not have the same expectations or sex drive, which is why the fandom and me think Cash and Quinny would make the bestest of friends. Season 3. Darren has basically realised that they have definitely been kind of a fucking dick. The worst. So he turns up to Cash's house to discuss their relationship stuff. Cash is back in with the essays again, and he says he's got his hands full with his nan, even though that's not entirely true. And his nan is the one who's actually trying to encourage him to get away from the essays and make new friends, or he'll be like his mother. That does not end well, basically. So Darren leaves, and then we have like some bonding time between Darren and their dad. Their dad notices something must be up. Darren kind of explains the gist of things, that they're on bad terms. Darren leaves. Cash does attend the school protest, but isn't like a big component in the protest itself. Cash and Darren do have a conversation separately where Cash says like, I know you think I'm scared, but I'm not. Darren asks, do you not want to have sex with anyone or just me? And Cash says, anyone. And, you know, it's kind of the usual vibes of like, this is a very new concept to Darren, and I don't know whether this is the first time Cash is explaining it or whether this has happened with the previous people that he was with, but either way it's still new to him, so he's still trying to find the words that he feels fits his feelings best, which is hard, especially when it's not really a thing that's often talked about openly or in the mainstream. And he says, I don't get the urge to go any further, and if I do, it's not enjoyable. Cash gets really emotional, and Darren's trying to be like, no, it's fine, I don't care. And he's like, so you'd be totally fine never doing it at all. Doesn't go super great. So he's like, can we be friends, please? I don't want to mess this up. And he's so upset and like clearly loves Darren, but there seems to be no hope at this current moment. I feel like as well, it's always a compromise for asexual people and characters. It's rare to show anything different. So I feel like that as well is kind of the expectation that Cash has for this situation. Later we see Darren watching Cash sleep during this protest. Then we have that really lovely moment between Darren and Quinny where she writes to Darren, am I too much? And they say, yeah, but you're my too much. So for Darren, loving Quinny as she is easy, but can Darren do the same for Cash? At a later point, Anne-Marie confronts Cash about what happened with Harper when she finally finds out. He doesn't actually really make excuses for a lot of things that he goes through. I think he does say like, oh, he didn't really have much of a choice, but I just don't really remember. Like, you know, I think it's quite clear to us as viewers that he did what he did, because if he stood up to them, he would get beaten up or worse, left abandoned, his family could have been targeted, and he probably still wouldn't have been able to help Harper alone. The only way he could help was doing what he did. Anne-Marie then tells him to stay away from Darren, and the fact that he's still hanging out with the Eshays is totally fucked. Like, he has much choice. As well, at that point, he hasn't really fully, one, found himself, two, found his people, but you know, they have a lot on him, they know where he lives with his nan, you know, all these sorts of factors that are, you know, a lot of these normal middle-class kids just would not get. Darren's dad visits them at work. Rivers has a moment with Darren. Darren says that they feel like they are hard to love, and Rivers is absolutely fucking devoed, absolutely devo, and is like, you are not hard to love. And we can really see across the story arc that Cash and Darren are actually a really good match in many ways, as this point leads on to Cash repeatedly explaining that he loved Darren exactly as they are, like exactly as they are, with no expectation to change them at all. And Darren perceives love as sexual affection, as seemingly their parents have been very absent, although their dad is only just now starting to make up for it somewhat in the first season. The only affection they have received outside of family is often in secret and sex. As a non-binary black kid, it's hard to find someone who accepts them in their entirety, which is what my comparison was earlier as well, that Cash probably has a similar issue. Some examples of that being proven is we find out in that first episode that Ant got a secret handy from Darren, and the guy at the private school, you know, he has the privacy of his own bedroom, away from family. Darren's not somebody he goes to school with, so nobody would really know or give a shit. And then one of the times he turns Darren down and Darren's leaving, they leave very loudly, shouting about very personal things for everybody in their dorms to hear, kind of exposing a lot of secrets. We see Darren is waiting at Cash's house. Darren apologises for their behaviour towards Cash before, that they want to make it work. And they say, I know you feel like you have to be alone or no one would love you for who you are. I want you more than anything. I'm here. Learning to accept the love they receive and giving the love they want to get. But a lot of the things that Darren has done in this season towards Cash were really hurtful, and kind of displayed that Darren wasn't really paying attention to some of the things that Cash was showing, whether on purpose or not. Cash's response is, me and you should just stop wasting each other's time. And Darren says, so that's it, you won't even try? And Cash says, nah. And he goes inside. His walls are up. Darren said some of the most hurtful things you can say to an asexual person, when all Cash did was love Darren and stood strong in his own boundaries and tried to explain. One day, Cash brings home a lot of canned food. We know that he's basically preparing to expose himself and the Eshays for what they did to Harper. So he's trying to do what he can to make sure that the only person that he loves and who he knows loves him back will at least be somewhat taken care of whilst he is not there. She says, you do look after me, who's going to look after you? And he just kind of goes, I think you'll outlive us all, man. Then yeah, the next scenes are him at Chuck's house, but like sort of Eshay headquarters, it feels like. Cash nicks a phone to get the evidence and then sends it to Harper. And it's a video of them all in the car whilst Harper is clearly too drunk to be coherent, let alone able to consent. Cash is seen in the video and named in the video, and he's basically giving permission to report it and get him in trouble. In one of the last few scenes of season 1, Cash wasn't in the class. Nan is still looking out for him and shouts at him to run because the cops were at the house looking for him. So his instinct is to run to the school to see Darren. So in SLTs, we have Jojo in class saying some people might choose not to have sex because, and that's when Cash bursts into the room with police cars pulling up not long after. He gives his like big long gay love speech about how he's been in love with Darren since year 8. We have like a very iconic Spider moment of
Darren wants Cash's SJ babies,
and also Quinny smacking back with a
"Shut the fuck up, Spider."
Darren and Cash kiss, and then Cash is pulled away and slammed to the table and arrested and taken away. And that's kind of the end of the season for him. When it comes to season 2, thanks to Cash giving Harper the evidence needed, he is in jail with a couple of the other SJs, but unfortunately Chuck did not get jailed because he was not in the video. Darren is now facing people like Sasha, saying things like, we're trying to make campus safe for non-males, and saying that Darren is standing with an accused rapist, even though everyone who matters at least knows what happened. She still pushes with like, what would that say to other survivors out there? And it's down to Harper to sort of tell her to mind her own fucking business. This season we see that shift in the friendship groups again. We don't have Dusty, as well as Harper moving from being in a group with Sasha and Missy into being in a group with Quinny, Darren and Anne-Marie. But also we do kind of see Missy having her own kind of conflict about whether she wants to or should still be friends with Sasha as well, based on how she treats her. And I'm like, again, there are so many frustrating things about season 2. So one of them is like, I don't really know why they think Chuck is the one doing the dead bird shit. If he gets caught, then he's probably going to be arrested because he's likely to be under like close watch because of all the other stuff going on with Cash and the other SJs who were arrested and jailed. I also didn't really understand why one of the birds was on Harper's doorstep, but whatever. Yeah, I don't understand why Darren believed Chuck when he was saying that Cash knew about the plan and was actually keen for it. Like, please, shut the fuck up. Darren doesn't visit Cash face to face in jail when they're supposed to. Cash's nan goes to find Darren to confront them about not showing up or answering the phone calls anymore, and they ask if she can take them, and she's like, yeah, but you've got to put some fucking clothes on, you jailbait. Darren shows up in Cash's clothes. During Darren's visit, we see Cash's face sort of change from quite a hard, defensive demeanour into like a very soft, warm smile, and Cash says like, oh, the clothes kind of suit you actually. Also, they kind of like my clothes. And Darren's like, yeah, they are probably yours actually. So Darren explains why they've been missing for a bit, haven't been answering calls and whatever, and been doubting Cash's honesty. And Cash is pissed. It's similar to when Darren was mean about Cash's sexual preferences in season 1. Like, wow, how dare you question my character like that? Like, how could you love me if you think I'm that kind of person? And he just fucks off. He's like, no, I'm done, bye. So Darren goes back out to the car. Nan waited. Darude is in the fucking car. Nan is saying that, you know, life goes on if Darren decides to leave and not continue a relationship with Cash. But she does say, like, don't give up on Dougie so fast. I love that she calls him Dougie. It's so cute. Douglas Dougie. She then explains a bit more to Darren how they got Darude. Which is so fucking sad. It's a horrible backstory. I think it was like Cash's cousin or something. They had loads of baby ducklings they were going to kill, and they rescued one because Dougie was so upset about it. He was like, Nan, if we could just save one. Nan basically says he can't stand the idea of another living creature suffering. Harper then drops the case. Cash gets out and has to choose between getting in a car with Nan and Darren or getting in a car with Chuck, because Chuck's there picking up the other Eshays anyway. And yeah, he does go home with Nan. And I think he was pleased to see that Darren turned up at all. This was literally the physical embodiment of Cash repeatedly having to make this decision between choosing the path he really wants to take versus the path that he's familiar with and the path that has kept him safe most of his life. Changing from that is very risky for him. Cash obviously meets with the principal, gets her a coffee, hoping that he can come back to school, and she's like, no, it needs to be a safe space. And he's like, oh yeah, that makes sense, don't worry. But he's just so sad, disappointed, embarrassed, and he doesn't tell anyone that he did talk to her. He makes out that he doesn't even want to go back to school, even to Darren. Like, he covered it up that he was out so early, that he was going and getting Darren a cup of coffee. And I think that as a character, he sees his worth in how other people deem him worthy. Usually it's linked to his illegal activities, his link to the Eshays and their assumptions rather than the reality of his situation and his character. Cash and Darren do make up properly. When Nan comes in, they both sit up as if they've been caught, like, doing stuff, which I think is really funny. It's almost like Cash and Darren both see emotional, I don't know, like bearing their emotions as like just as embarrassing as being caught in the middle of shagging. Nan now has a live-in boyfriend who's always like mostly naked, it seems, most of the time, but also slay for more Darude just being there, just more Darude. When Darren goes off to school, Cash finds a tab and spends the rest of his first day out of jail properly, like, just high. And honestly, go off, mate. Before he did that, he was looking at like possibly changing his appearance. He got all of his clothes out the cupboard, like he was going to throw them all out, and he was about to shave his head, but he stops before that and just decides to go and get high. So yeah, see the point about like he sees his worth through other people's assumptions about him, and he wants to sever this connection to the Eshays but also struggles to do so. And then we just have the fucking funniest high sequence that I think I've ever seen. Like, I think this is funnier than when everyone eats mushrooms at camp. Like, I just don't know what it is about this man. But like, what is this funny like little straight-legged skipping thing he was doing? It killed me. He is such a brilliant like physical performer because this was so fucking funny. Cash goes to Darren's work. And work has banned Eshays, so Darren has to be like, he isn't an Eshay anymore, so he can stick around. He just looks like one, but he isn't one anymore. So yeah, Cash speaks to Harper after her shift, and he thanks her for dropping the case. She asks if he still sees Chuck, and I can't remember what the answer is, but I think he says no, and he apologises for what happened that night, and that he is a coward for how he handled it. I don't think he had much choice, honestly. Especially at that point, he didn't have any other friends. It's not like he could text Anne-Marie or Darren or any of that lot to be like, hi, call the police or whatever. But he is one of the few characters who owns up to mistakes he's made and actively tries to apologise and make things better with the people involved, even if it doesn't make him feel better. Like the Darude story, he hates to see other people in pain. So yeah, she does say that she doesn't blame him and never has done, but won't help him feel better about it, which is so valid. And she asks him when he's coming back to school, and that, like, she's the only person he actually tells the truth to about this, which I think is so interesting, that out of everybody, the only person he tells is her. And like, I think as well, these two also have a lot of connecting life factors that they could relate on and bond over. I like the main one really being is that they were both failed by their parents. Like, we have no idea where Harper's mum is, and she is or has already emancipated herself from her father, who literally would go and get high and then attack her in her home, to the point that she would have to defend herself, and he often ended up in A&E, whether it was due to any wounds that she inflicted or just the fucking drugs. But you know, she got lucky in a lot of ways that Cash didn't, and they didn't have support systems really in place. But where she got lucky was the principal stepped in, Amory stepped in. She also had a good foster family for a short while in season 1, where Cash only had his nan and the Eshays, who, you know, it definitely could be considered grooming what happened to him, because he would have been very, very young. And also, like, there's quite a few Eshays who are very young boys, like maybe around age 10. When Harper has her driving lesson with the principal, she asks why the principal is doing this for her, and Woods, the principal, says that the thought of one of these kids slipping through the cracks keeps her up at night. And then Harper's like, okay, but what about Cash? Because if you don't do anything for him, he's another one who's slipping through the cracks. She identifies that he's trying to improve himself and his life, but people have stood in the way and left him to the elements, i.e. the Eshays, including the principal. So she's doing what she can with the privileges that she is just lucky to get, to try and help somebody else, which I don't know if anybody else would have done or would have been able to do. Throughout this season, we see a lot of Chuck kind of just like harassing and chasing after Cash, from constantly phoning him, turning up at his house. Sometimes he's been able to avoid it because he's been inside and can hide. But in this instance, Chuck turns up when Cash is outside the front of his house gardening for his nan, but luckily the principal Woods shows up and sprays him with the hose, calls him by his real name, which I don't know if I can remember, but it's just so funny, and then also calls him Chicken, which I assume that that's like what Chuck means, which is very funny. Why would you either call yourself Chuck or let somebody else call you Chuck? Hi, Chicken. He buggers off and the principal comes in to have a chat with Cash. Then the next day, Cash turns up at school and Quinny and Darren are so surprised and excited, but Harper and the principal share a little smile. Shake a little smile. Then we have the fucking school camp episode, okay? And I think that this show is so funny in numerous ways. One of them is that they sexualize the dudes a lot, and that makes me laugh because most shows actively sexualize women and women only. This show, I don't think sexualizes any of the women ever at any point, but they repeatedly sexualize the men. But we basically have Darren ogling Rowan and Malachi as they apply sunscreen on each other. It's really ridiculous. It's really silly. I mean, in season 1, Amory was ogling Malachi and Spider playing basketball as they were grabbing each other's crotches and kissing, so... But she wasn't interested in Spider ever at all? Okay. They're all playing Never Have I Ever in Amory's cabin with the alcoholic snuck in. So we learn a bunch of people's sex and romance history, and we know that Cash has done certain sex things with the other 2 people who was on the map with. And I mean, you know, it's partly how he figured out that he's ace, isn't it? He literally says, like, even when I've had the urge to go further, I hate it and it's never good. And you know he's on the sex map. I know it's the map, but it's a map about like sex and shit. So like, Darren, please. So like, later, after the party has been disbanded, Cash climbs down from the top bunk into Darren's bunk. Bonus points of being non-binary, you just kind of get to choose the gender that you want to be today. So Cash got to choose being a woman in season 1 for like when they had to split the class for something, and now they are choosing they're a boy now, so they can share the bedroom with their boyfriend. So Cash climbs down into Darren's bed. He can tell that Darren is off. Something about, like, Darren is not doing good. And Cash starts putting on the moves on Darren. But Darren does stop him, knowing it's not what he wants. He doesn't want that. He doesn't want to do it. And like, here we start to think, you know, Darren is starting to at least, you know, get on the same page as Cash, has paid attention, is listening, understood the assignment, you know. Cash still feels like his worth is in what other people want. And we see him compromise his boundaries in season 2 occasionally, but thankfully Darren does uphold them for Cash when he is feeling weak. Obviously they all get dumped in the middle of nowhere by this fucking creepy PE teacher, and Cash wants to like debrief on the previous night. Basically the gist is Cash feels rejected, Darren feels pitied, Cash wants to talk it out, but then they stumble upon the magic mushrooms. Everybody but Quinny gets high, blah blah blah. We notice this pattern that Cash was given a place to talk about stuff with his nan if he needed, even though he had nowhere and no one else for this. So he wants to communicate with people close to him, as this is how he has experienced love. The only experience of love he really has is from his nan, and she has always been supportive with no question, you know, shares her thoughts and feelings but lets him make his life decisions. But they do openly talk about some stuff that maybe isn't that common for the other kids, like Darren, for example. Darren, however, has always been shut down, shut out when they want to talk about things. That even when people they love and who love them, you know, like Cash, their dad, try to have these conversations, it is hard or impossible for Darren to like actively participate in those conversations. Cash and Darren leave the group together, and Cash says, I know it's tough, but we got to learn to talk to each other. And Darren sort of explains that they feel jealous that Cash has done sex stuff with these other people, but not them. And that they feel, you know, yeah, they feel jealous. Why not me? And it's like, well, for one, it's just timing. And for two, at least you have me now at a point where I know who I am and I'm not just doing stuff because I feel like I have to. And this is where we have asexual lighting. I don't think I've ever seen asexual lighting, but we got the purple, grey, black and white lighting. Darren says that they don't want to make Cash uncomfortable. Cash says that Darren only makes them feel comfortable and that they are each other's soulmates. And like, yeah, I agree that they kind of are that like two halves of a whole vibe. They both have something that the other lacks, or they are complete opposites in many ways, and that they could both really learn and grow from each other, because even though they have a lot of those differences, there are things that does connect them together. And then we have an asexual sex scene. Slay! And the lighting in this scene seems to sort of change here between ace and bi lighting. And like, it literally, every time I see it, but also like especially the first time I saw this scene, fucking goosebumps, bitch.
Crying!
Fucking like, I can't think of another example of an asexual sex scene ever on TV or film. Obviously, I have not watched everything in the world, so there's probably loads of things I have missed. But this is my first experience of this. And it was pretty fucking cool, honestly. Seeing how Cash might feel comfortable in participating in his own way with their partner, his partner Darren. But also this scene adds some nuance to what the show has already kind of provided so far about asexual people. That, you know, ace people, even sex repulsed or sex avoidant ace people, can participate and enjoy participating in sex, but it may not look like typical sex. And sometimes it does. And that is the asexual spectrum. But yeah, I really appreciated that it wasn't just like straight up banging. And it wasn't straight up abstinence. It was kind of like they did have an in-between. And I would love to see in like fuck's sake, I'm asexual as well. I would like to see, in a non-perverted way, more exploration of that with these characters. and maybe other characters, but I'll get there. Because I just think it's brilliant. And it just makes me want to cry. I love this man. This character makes me want to cry all the time because, well, one, I see myself in him, even though he's a fucking Eshe in Australia. But yeah, his character does show a lot of nuances of asexuality. And, you know, like I said, that there is no one representation that will represent everybody in whatever community. But I think most people will agree that this representation is really good because it's nuanced and not black and white, and it's not as simple as some people try to make it out to be. Like, he does a really good job at times trying to explain the conflicts and nuances and confusions of being a bi-ace. For one. Yeah, I just love him, and I would just and whilst I love Quinny so much, it's a lot easier to see autism in characters that aren't named as autistic, but it's not as often that easy to feel that way about asexuality with characters. Anyway, back to normal life after camp. There is a small moment where Darren and Cash are arguing about Cash not voting. Darren says that Cash could get arrested or put in jail if he doesn't register to vote, which, you know, I don't know the Aussie system, so I'm not going to comment. I do not know. However, I do partially understand Cash's reluctance to register to vote and to vote when clearly he's been failed by the system many times, by the government or the governments in place during his lifetime, but also he may be lacking the privilege of being educated on politics to even know like who or how to vote. Like in the UK, for an example, many of us have to vote tactfully rather than just voting straight for a party that we agree or align with because of how our voting system works. It sucks. But yeah, Harper is then talking about her plan to move her, Cash and Darren in together because Cash is 18 and most places are not letting her rent because she's 17. Cash and Darren chat about the moving in together. Cash doesn't really want to rush things by moving in. I think he's hesitant for a few reasons, and you know, like, he's just found out there's something that could work for him and Darren in like the long term for their relationship. It still feels very new and kind of precarious, so he doesn't want to disrupt that. Maybe he isn't ready to be around Darren as much as like living together would entail, and as well, he's still not really fully gotten rid of Chuck in his life. And I think really before wanting to put his all into moving on, I think he wants to close that chapter first. Then they all take Quinny to the zoo dressed in like green / as frogs. She doesn't seem very into it. They all kind of keep leaving her behind at different sections of the zoo, but Cash notices, because he's our autistic boy, we love him. He notices Quinny doesn't seem very present and checks in on her, and he accidentally brings up the moving out. He didn't know that she didn't know. And like, I think this could also be another thing that will then be adding to him like maybe wanting to hold off on moving or feeling a bit unsure about moving in with Darren, is that, you know, if Darren's best friend doesn't even know that they're moving in together, then does it really feel right? You know, that sort of is a thing that really nails in that thought. But then as well, we have Cash eating dinner with his nan and her boyfriend. The nan mentions her boyfriend's got a flat in this warehouse. Hint, hint, babe. He'll rent it real cheap, love. And Cash is like, oh, you've been talking to Darren then? And she's like, I'm always talking to Darren. I talk to Darren regularly, babe. And then Chuck, or like one of the Eshes, throws a fucking brick through the window. And again, point made from earlier. And another red flag of like, you can't leave your nan. You can't move out and subject Harper and Darren to this as well. You can't leave your nan unprotected when this could be happening. You need to end things with Chuck and the Eshes first. You need to find a way to end things on good enough terms that they will leave you alone. which again is just something that the others just would not understand. When it comes to Harper and her father, like, she had the law on her side, but for Cash, it would be a lot more difficult. He confronts Chuck. It ends with him having to agree to do one last job to finally get out. He hasn't told anyone he's doing this, as he genuinely didn't have anything to do with Chuck or the Eshays generally for a long time, but Chuck has been harassing him all season. He just wants to finally sever the tie, move on. He knows that Eshays are, you know, not law-abiding, so he needs to find another way that works. Cash says, let's move into Harper and Darren, knowing he's about to end things with Chuck and the Eshays. Harper is excited. Darren and Cash are going to share a room. Darren thinks Cash would be okay with their version of sex whenever. And he's like, babe, no. Cash is like, not, and has to try and explain this. Darren is not very good at talking about things first, or like, because we have seen in other sexual relationships on this show, like particularly between Malachi and Anne-Marie,
but also between Missy and Spider and Ant and Harper,
a lot of like actual verbal consent, whereas I don't think Darren's very good at that part. I'm not saying that Darren tries to do things without getting consent first. It's just something that Darren's never really been taught or practiced. Also, like, when it comes to this issue in particular, like, this is a thing that like so many couples deal with. Sometimes your sexual appetites are just different. Sometimes they change through your relationship, and sometimes your needs just do not match each other, or they don't match up at the same time, even if you might, you know, if you might be sexually, I don't even know what fucking words to use right now. Even if you might have, like, no, I can't even think of another way of framing that sentence. But also, like, I generally think it's quite an interesting dynamic to see this set up between Cash and Darren, as this is often considered like an issue in cishet relationships. It's always the woman who never wants to have sex, and it's the man who does. And like, when we look at Cash and Darren outwardly and their personalities and stuff like that, you know, someone who is seen as like very masculine, Cash, and having been an Eshay, and done a lot of these like scary, impulsive, illegal things, it's interesting to have this dynamic in this kind of gender fucked way. But also, like, it is a thing among other queer relationships, even if you're not asexual, or if one of you isn't asexual. But it is often just kind of seen as like a problem on the person who's not interested in fucking all the time. Whereas I do think that we are moving forward from that. Cash is at Chuck's, and like, I was like, is Cash debating on stabbing Chuck? You know, he has a knife on him. I think he thinks better of it because he doesn't want to hurt people, including Chuck, but this would also hurt not only Chuck, it would hurt himself and everyone else who loves him, because he'd probably be going to fucking prison for stabbing somebody. So he thinks better of it. Good boy. Chuck is like being way too chill and nice and friendly, and it's very suspicious. Suspicious bitch. Whilst the party's going on at the warehouse flat, the housewarming, Cash isn't there, misses basically the entire thing thanks to Chuck. Cash stands up to Chuck, and Chuck starts saying really fucked up shit about Darren and Cash, and Cash loses his shit, pins Chuck to the boat, and then we hear about a bit more of Cash's backstory, why and how he's an Eshay, how he was named Cash. The name specifically is so fucked. The rest of it is kind of like, oh yeah, okay, we knew there was some fucked up shit going on. However, the origin story of his fucking Eshay name, fucked. I'm very curious. Season 3, is he going to go by Doug, and not Cash anymore? Or is it just going to be Cash because everyone's used to it? Cash then has a go about, you know, how Chuck ruined the group when he put Harper in that car, and he's not taking his shit anymore. He doesn't want in. He saw the world for what it was and wanted to leave. Turns out the boat engine was not fucking broken, and Chuck was lying about it. Cash gets back to the party, but Chuck blows his cover, so everyone fucking knows he was with Chuck. Darren doesn't want to hear it. After everything, doesn't even want to let him explain. So Darren fucks off and goes to the private school, but the guy that they usually sleep with isn't in. However, Dusty is, so they go and stay with Dusty in his room. Darren does not return for 2 days. Cash has been very anxious and worried, and he says to Harper, like, can you just like yell at me or something? And she's like, that would make you feel better, not me. Cash swears on his nan that this was the final time to get Chuck off his back forever, and Harper believes him but remains angry, which is fair. Darren does turn up. Cash tries to explain. Darren's like, I got the texts. But Darren then does lie about where they had been. I think they said they were at their mum's house or something because their dad is travelling for his independent book tour. Slay. Cash gives Darren his phone passcode, and it is Daru's birthday, which is the 22nd of July. Does that make him a Cancer or a Leo? I can't remember the dates exactly. But Darren's like, I don't want to look through your phone. They then owned up to where they actually were. Cash very fairly is asking, like, okay, but what would have happened if you did find Jake? Oh, that's his name. Didn't have his name in any of the other notes. What would have happened if you did find Jake? And Darren's like, well, I didn't. We both did a shitty thing. Can we just move on? And I'm like, please. I think Cash's questions are valid. Yeah, he probably could have and should have spoken to Darren at least about this, but also Harper about the last job for Chuck after the brick incident, because I don't know if anyone even knows about the brick except his nan. But Darren went to use Cash's like biggest, like I wrote in my notes, insecurity, but I don't know whether it's, I don't think it's an insecurity, but you know, it's like one of the biggest things you can do to just fuck anybody up. But like especially somebody who the whole like issue in the relationship has been kind of to do with each other's sexual appetites and needs. And yeah, they went to go and cheat on him. Like that action is not equal to Cash's actions in the slightest. Cash's actions were for the purpose of getting rid of the Eshes from his life, protecting the people in his life so he can move on. Darren's is more revenge. It's not good, mate. Cash is waiting for Dusty in his room to have a little chat. And like nothing happened. And it's like, well, maybe because you have a track record of fucking people when they are vulnerable. And I was like, yes, Cash, slay. You tell him, bitch. And like, he's so right. For one, both Harper and Malachi were both very vulnerable people that he went for. But also Anne-Marie, even though he didn't sleep with Anne-Marie, he did try and nearly did. And it was always at points where she was especially vulnerable. But yeah, Dusty's like, Darren says you're ace. And this is the first and only time we hear this word ever in the season. And Cash's response is, fuck you, that's maybe, I don't know. And it's like the fuck you is his Eshe response. And like he's been learning to try and stop before he says things like that anymore, because there is no shame in being queer. He doesn't need to hide it, even if he might not know what to call it. And it is a wall. It prevents people from being able to come in, and it did prevent him and Darren from making up a few times in season 1, I think. And like he doesn't want to do that. He doesn't want to keep people he loves out anymore. Dusty then makes Cash feel really bad about being with Darren when Darren is a hypersexual person and Cash is asexual. And he says, don't you think it's a little selfish asking them to give it up? And then Dusty tries to ask about Harper, and Cash just like gets up and tells him to get his like lock on the door fixed because he broke the door. So like even in this moment, he's protecting his friends from shitty people, i.e. Harper from Dusty. Because no, Dusty, you do not get to ask about Harper after everything you put her through, let alone everybody else. And yeah, again, another thing that happens a lot, and this is something I have sort of mentioned a little bit, but like this is also the one time that I am hesitant about the solution being polyamory or open relationships, because like for one, in this show they are very young. They're like 17, 18, maybe going on 19 for Cash. I don't think they'd be capable of doing it in like a healthy way. But also too, it always seems to be a default for the asexual person character must relent on their boundaries and their relationship expectations for an allosexual person. And we see Cash repeatedly trying to compromise and trying to talk to Darren, but Darren is often not willing to hear it. And then people are deeming Cash as selfish. He just has basic boundaries and standards he wants and needs in a relationship, just like everybody else does. Just because they don't match up to your expectations doesn't make them wrong. It's kind of like the argument / conversation about what's considered cheating. It's absolutely completely individual. Some people don't see emotional cheating as cheating as long as it doesn't go past just talking to somebody you don't know. Some people, like I said, open relationships or polyamory, as long as it's kind of openly discussed and there's boundaries and stuff put in place. Sleeping with other people isn't cheating either, so it's the same kind of shit. Like, your own personal relationship boundaries are yours and they vary from person to person. As long as they are sort of discussed and agreed by everybody involved, it's not your business, Dusty. Fuck off. Cash talks to Darren in the bathroom. Cash says he knows that they didn't hook up, Darren and Dusty. Darren does apologise for being a bitch. Cash feels like he can't give Darren what they need, and Darren doesn't agree. Cash, says, you went looking for sex. Either way, they break up. Darren wants to do anything to keep Cash, so then goes to get to know the Puritans a little bit. There's this really great moment between Cash and his nan about this whole thing. He's like, I feel like someone's always going to be making a compromise if they be with me. It's not fair. I would do anything. Why does it have to be the one thing I can't change about myself? And Cash's nan gives him a kick up the ass about Darren and is like, there's all kinds of ways to love someone and to be with someone. You don't have to play by other people's rules. That's literally what I just fucking said. Cash shows up at the formal in asexual colours. I love him so much. So yeah, the season, I'm not even going to get into what this last episode was like, but the season ends that, they're together again and happy, I guess, for now. And there are some chances for development with asexual stuff and Cash generally that I think would be really exciting to see in season 3 and onwards, if there are more.
No, only one more.
Obviously, I've said Cash and Quinny being closer friends, iconic. Cash and Harper being closer friends, iconic. Their friends all helping Cash and Darren to be better at communicating, but especially Quinny, because I think Cash is autistic. Cash and Malachi finding out they're autistic, lovely. And one I have spotted a little bit on Tumblr, I've seen a lot of discussion about how Spider's representation is kind of accidentally asexual. He definitely looks more along the lines of demisexual in presentation, and I think that would be an immaculate plotline for season 3. Imagine he's realising he's asexual or on that spectrum, and the only person he knows who is also ace or like that is Cash. Word gets around. Even if Cash didn't tell people or wasn't out in that way, people seem to fucking know everything. He speaks to Cash, so Cash helps Spider through this realization, and congrats, Spider is now queer because
asexual people are queer and are considered as such, because any deviation from the societal norm of cis-het relationships is queer, bitch.
Which I think would also be just such a fucking humongously massive dunk on his mum, who was pissed that she had a son for one, and pissed that she had a straight son. Babes! Imagine. Anyway, I think it would be an immaculate storyline, because we definitely have seen many possible signs of that being the case for his character. But also a new aesthetic for Cash. I would love to see a new aesthetic for him that kind of combines some of his Eshe elements, but also with his new queer identity. There are plenty of things that he does wear that a lot of queer people I know wear. Different hairstyle, he doesn't have to be entirely different. Like I said in, I think my video just generally talking about the 2 seasons out. Something that signifies he is no longer an Eshe, but maybe that that's where he came from. It's time to get rid of this mullet, or what the fuck ever that is. Mohawk? I don't know, man. It's time. But yeah, so that was my video talking about Cash and the asexual representation in Heartbreak High. I love him. He makes me and a lot of my asexual friends so happy, but also my friends who aren't asexual happy. I think he's a really brilliant character to point to as like a, hey, here's a great show that kind of explains a little bit of the experiences that I've been through and how I feel about things. He's a complicated character, and like I think something that is talked about in interviews with the actors quite often, or at least initially when that first season came out, is that these characters are more than just their sexuality. It's not the only thing they've got going on for them, but like the fact that they are either proud in their sexuality, or you know, still working through it. Like Cash was still trying to work out what's going on, where he sits with that. Like Malachi had his whole like bisexual awakening.
Hopefully Spider will have his demisexuality awakening place.
But there's so many other things going on with them, that they are whole people and not just like, oh, that's the asexual guy, that's the bisexual guy, that's, you know. And as well that their sexualities and genders are more complicated than just this person's gay. I just love, while season 2 pissed me off for many reasons, I really do just love some of these characters so much, because I do think they've been created so well, and they make me excited of the future of queer and disabled characters on TV and film. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe and share my videos if you haven't already. Let me know your thoughts on Cash. Yeah, I'll just love him. I just love him.
Just love him so much.
Fuck, I'm gonna go cry over Cash now. Okay, bye. Yeah, anyway, I'll see you next week. Bye.